Good morning, last in line faithful. Welcome again to another episode of Get Out of Your Way for the month of October. We're going to talk about the ABCs of how we get in our way, how we self-inflict ways of impeding our progress. We have a great guest today. I'm extremely honored because this guy has been, we were connected through a mutual friend, and technology is wonderful because we can be in separate parts of the country, separate walks of life, and we can come together on this platform and share our faith-based experiences, our perspectives. And I think you guys might want to grab a notepad because today I've got Dom Brightmon, and I'm going to read a little bit about Dom here. So Dom is an award-winning speaker, certified member of the John Maxwell team, best-selling author of Going North, which looks like a very exciting project that I want to dive into a little bit. So Stay the Course. It's talking about elite performers, 7 secrets to keys and sustainable success, which I love because success can be fleeting. And then one book we're going to kind of dive into at the beginning, which I like the title, Crappy to Happy. And it's talking about sacred stories of transformational joy. So Dom is a host of a podcast called Going North. And he's going to talk a little bit about that, but I like your mantra at the end: advance others to advance yourself. If we as a society can grab on to just one portion of that and that theme and that concept of advancing somebody else to advance ourselves, man, I think we will see light years of progress. Dom, welcome to the show.
Man, thank you, John. Man, love the premise of the show, last in line leadership, baby, because leaders do eat last. They got to let the troops eat first, man. So I'm honored to be here with you. Shout out to Chaz for hooking us up, man.
Yes, awesome. I love it because ordinarily would our paths have crossed? Who knows? But this is awesome. Hey, talk about a little bit of that Crappy to Happy book.
My pleasure indeed. Crappy to Happy. It's a one heck of a wonderful title for one, and it's a wonderful project that's actually an anthology project where myself and 29 other authors contribute chapters to the book. So it's a group project, a group collective effort. Mm-hmm. And my chapter in the book was titled Some Gifts Are Wrapped Up in Adversity. And I'm sure you can agree with that,
Wow.
Donnie, because it's so darn true. Because with life, you're going to get harder. As a Christian, you're going to get hit even harder because you're representing Christ. Heck, I was even reading 2 Timothy yesterday, and I got to that portion of the book, and I was like, wow, it just hit me. It's like every time you read something in the Bible that you really have read before, it still can hit you with something new, especially if you haven't touched it in a while. And just with that title and that chapter in particular actually takes us back to the year of 2012, where people thought the world was going to end, even though no man knows a day or an hour.
Sure.
And what really happened is that we just lost Twinkies for a month. That's all that really happened back in 2012. So,
which is significant in itself.
Exactly. Life-changing event. Like babies cried because of that.
Yes. Man, that is awesome. And adversity is a thing, regardless of what people think. It is a thing, and it's not going away anytime soon. The Bible promises it, but it also promises peace through it, through our faith in Christ. And I think as leaders in society, business, relationships, wherever we are, our faith can really drive the direction of other people, of our country, ultimately. I mean, as a people, I think we're starving for Christians to rise up and not beat people over the head, but live the example, live that Christ example. So today, when we talk about getting out of our way, last in line leadership, like you mentioned earlier, the whole goal and mission of this project that God gave me just basically thumped me over the head until I understood it and got it and walked it out, is to empower, equip, and encourage, right? Leaders throughout all walks of life, in their workplace, community, homes, from faith-based standpoint. And that's our goal, man, is to just weave in faith-based principles in the way we lead. So today we're going to start out with the A of the ABCs, and which is approach. And I'm interested to hear what your perspective is, because I've had a lot of guests on during this time for this theme of October. And man, we all kind of come back to sort of the same thing, the base of this, but I want to hear your perspective. So I talk about controlling the internal and deflecting the external, because attitude and effort is where it really starts. And there's so many attempts to come at us from external forces. How do you kind of keep the main thing internally, and learn how to deflect some of that external stuff?
Yes, and one of the major things that I usually do to really keep the main thing is through something I call the RAVE method. So RAVE.
Okay.
The R is for reading great material. The A is for audio immersion. The
Mm,
V is for visual stimulation, and the E is for encouragement.
mm,
And the E about encouragement is not just encouraging others, but encouraging yourself as well. Because, like, every morning, like, sometimes it's going to be harder than others to get out of the bed, and you got to
mm-hmm.
encourage yourself, remind yourself, it's like, hey, I got to get out of bed here. And
Yeah.
then you get to really encourage other people. With the visual stimulation, you have to be careful of what your eyes are taking in, because, as they say, garbage in, garbage out.
Mm-hmm.
And especially as believers, like, we have to really walk circumspectly, as the book says. And it can be more tough nowadays, where folks are really trying to vie for your attention.
Mm-hmm.
Attention is almost the new currency nowadays, because everybody's trying to get it. And with everything out there that's built to not only grab your attention, but also keep your attention. Like, you can go on YouTube and just try to look up an old video or listen to a couple songs. And the next thing you know, 3 hours later, you're in some black hole flicking out a bunch of clips.
That's right.
And you're like,
That's right.
God
That's right.
dang.
How'd I get here? Yeah. That's great. I love the visual stimuli portion, because I haven't really thought about that. Because you're right, attention. Everybody wants it, and everybody's willing to push your buttons to get it. And everybody we know what we are as people, and we're visually stimulated. And man, that, like you said, that can lead you down a path you probably didn't intend to go on. Are you? Let's just assume for a second that you and I don't have all the answers and have it all figured out. Let's just make that crazy assumption. Okay, let's do that. And let's say Don Brightmon gets up in the morning and maybe maybe he's dreading some things for that particular day, because he knows what his tasks are, and he's not excited about maybe one or two of those. How do you push through some of that? Because a lot of folks wake up and maybe don't like their job. So that's an everyday occurrence for them. But, since you and I have everything together and have it all figured out, that's a rare occurrence for you, right? So what do you do in that rare situation that you have to push through some sort of dread factor?
Oh man. Every day is a peanut butter and jelly. Sometimes it's no bread and no jelly. Like, with those days, it's just really something inspirational. Funny enough, I keep sticky notes on my desk, and I have one of them here that says always focus on the payoff. I'm not sure that can be seen through the screen, but usually
Yeah.
something inspirational. I keep inspirational messages around me all the time. Like, when I'm out and about, I wear wristbands.
Yeah.
Not as much during COVID, of course, but
Sure.
usually just keeping inspirational messages around me all the time, and encouraging myself, and focusing on the big payoff, because every day isn't going to be sugar and rainbows. Folks think
Yeah.
I'm this happy-go-lucky dude all the time. That's why
Right.
I wrote part of it. And to be honest, like, you're going to have a peace that surpasses all understanding if
Yeah.
you're a believer, but at the same time, you're not going to be ready to go all the time. Like, those
No.
who are at the top of their field, no one has a great day every day.
No.
Like, it takes some encouragement. You have to tell yourself, like, all right, so what are the consequences of me not getting up out of this bed this morning? All right, I could probably call out sick, maybe act like I'm Mike Tyson, say I broke my back, it was a spinal part, or I could actually get up and just fight through the pain, just get through it, and get through this one step closer to what I'm trying to get out of life here, and just focusing
Mm-hmm.
on the payoff instead of, like, the right now. And that's something that's it, and it's easier said than done. I'm not gonna lie to you, because I still have those days
Yeah.
myself. We're all
Yeah.
human here. No one's
Sure.
exempt from that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's good. And you kind of hit two of the four with your sticky note. It's a simple but practical tool. You hit the read and you hit the visual, right? By the sticky
Mhm.
note, you're putting something encouraging. I've got a couple scripture on my computer right here. And, I think it's just a reminder. If we get enough reminders of the end game, and our goal, what the end is. Like, we already win. We know how this ends, and we win as believers. But if we get the end game in front of us every day as a reminder of, yes, I got to have a job to pay the bills, but why do I have to pay the bills? Well, because I'm leading a group of people within the four walls of my home, my family, that depend on me. Why is that important? Because the legacy of the generations behind me could depend on that. If you
Mhm.
break it down to an eternal perspective or to a bigger perspective than just today, my boss wants to talk to me and I don't want to go. That could be, we could get trapped into that short-sightedness. And I think what you said is key. Remember what the long-term deal is, what the payoff is. That's good, man. Um, you ever, so attitude and effort, those are the two things I think we can control, right? And our attitude drives our effort sometimes. Um, any examples kind of where throughout your middle of your day, let's say you had to make a course correction through the middle of the day. Cause let's be honest, we can start the day great, right?
Mhm.
My
Yep.
coffee, that's the way to start the day, baby. That day is golden. And when I get my coffee midday, guess what? The world has had a footprint or a fingerprint on my day, right? I've
Mhm.
encountered external things. How do you make those course corrections through the middle of the day, even if you start out good? Because a lot of people get knocked off, right? Knocked off course. They can get going, rolling, momentum, boom. Why are we not prepared for those kinds of things to keep going?
To be honest, like sometimes it could just be a false sense of expectation. Sometimes people have no expectations, some people have high expectations,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes, a lot of times, we get burned either way, to be honest,
Sure.
from both perspectives. And especially in the middle of the day where you probably had your lunch break or whatever, depending on your line of work, and the itis kicks in, you're just dozing off in the afternoon,
Yeah,
and the afternoon break kicks in.
absolutely.
Like movement's probably the best thing to do for yourself to keep yourself going and also to take a deep breath. Because funny enough, yesterday I was doing some early voting yesterday, and some lady was like, sir, I'm talking to you. Like, take the what are those things on your ears? Take that off your ears. I'm like, woman, this is a mask. I had a cloth mask around my face. I'm like, I take this off, I'm breaking the law. No. And she was like, okay, just want to make sure your vote counts. I'm like, okay. And I had to make sure I take a deep breath for a moment because emotions are running freaking high right now. And the last thing I want to do
Absolutely.
is really get into an argument with someone's grandmother over something that makes no sense whatsoever at all. And I could tell I would like even though I'm known as the guy who's always positive, I still have my moments where
Sure.
like sometimes it can be quick. It
Yeah.
can be quick. I still have a quick
Yep.
anger trigger that can sometimes happen. So sometimes it may be just be involving movement, making sure you keep your mindset right. Also making sure you sometimes take a deep breath and think things from
Mm-hmm.
an objective standpoint. Like
Yeah.
with her, she was just doing her job and her eyes may not have been all working since she may have been because with these masks
Yep.
crap that a lot of folks have to wear. Like glasses fog up. My glasses fog up.
Yep.
So it's hard to see after a while with those on. She probably didn't wear glasses because she probably had that problem too, and she thought it was something else. So
Yep.
making sure you think through situations as well as doing a little light exercises to really keep your body moving, especially if you have one of those jobs where you're sitting down a lot. Because to be honest, sitting kills. It's almost worse than cigarettes in a way because if you sit for a long time, you'll be more
Yep.
sedentary and your body will creak like a river.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, I think in that moment, that's huge because if people are listening right now, like I've been driven by emotion, and if we're driven by that, a lot of times we fail and we come up short whenever we let emotions drive us. But I think assessing the impact of that situation from a big perspective of your day, in that moment, what did that moment really have as of importance for the rest of your day? It was so small, but you could have
Hmm.
let it get so big. And if you do, which I've done, if you let emotion get you, you blow that situation up, then it does impact your day in a negative way. So I think it's more being self-aware and assess the impact of that moment. Like, is this really going to matter 2 hours from now? Probably not. And I'm with you. I went and voted yesterday too. And I'm telling you, man, that environment can test every portion of your five senses. Like, it can test every situation. So yeah, we got to go into situations just on a little bit prepared, kind of to not let our emotions get in the way. So that kind of leads us a little bit into the next one. So we covered the approach, and I think you hit it perfectly. I'm gonna use and steal the rave method. But barriers. Okay, so the next one is barriers. Barriers to our progress and growth. And growth's a big, broad thing, right? We can talk about growth for hours, but let's just break it down into a day situation, because we all want to grow in some way. Pick one thing that we grow in or get better in or progress in that day. Like, we tell our baseball kids, like, 1% better when they come to practice. When you leave here 2 hours from now, be 1% better at something. And so if we focus our day on 1% better, like, what are the barriers you deal with? Because we talk about insecurity, because we're talking about emotions too, right? Insecurity, fear, pride, these things that guys in particular deal with, but all leaders deal with, regardless of gender. So what do we do with that? You know, what happens when fear and insecurity rise up in us? Because those can be preventatives in us accomplishing whatever we want to accomplish that day. Those can be huge barriers. What do we do with that?
To be honest with those, like, you got to take them head on. Like with fear, it's been said that fear is a compass. Like, if you're scared about something, that means that may be where you need to be, because fear is where the growth happens, because growth is happiness. And no matter what area it is, like, sometimes you may have to have that difficult conversation with somebody. Folks, I've had difficult conversations with other folks. They've had them with me. And we may have been pissed off in the moment, a few moments afterwards, but looking back, it was actually for the greater good for both parties, because they've become better because of it. And not only fear, but also with, like, the imposter syndrome that's going on out there because of the wonders of social media and folks looking at curated feeds thinking that's what people actually live, which isn't all the way entirely true.
Sure.
Because social media, like, that's really a trap. Like, sometimes you have to give yourself digital downtime away from not only just social media, the main thing, but also just technology and period. Because like, even during this COVID thing where a lot of folks are trapped in homes, like, even myself, I had to limit some screen time because I got glasses already. I've been wearing glasses just about all my life, and all this screen time would be bad for my eyes after a while, and I can tell the darn difference. So it's really been just a bunch of things. Like with the fear itself, using the fear as a compass, like, there may be that time where you may have to make that approach. Like, I remember one time a buddy of mine, she actually was a professional home organizer. She had this one project, I believe it's like, I'm not sure if it was an invoice or something else you had to take care of. It was like on the bottom of a stack of books and papers for months. And she finally took care of it a few months ago, and it only took her 15 minutes. And she was worrying about that thing for months. So that one major thing, like, fear is a compass. Like, it, just imagine how much time she could have saved knowing that that one thing only took 15 minutes, and she lost months of time, especially psychic, spiritual energy, because she was letting that thing worry her to death when it only took 15 minutes. Like, fear is a compass most of the time. Like,
I haven't ever heard it put that way, but man, the sense that makes is astounding, because I've been in her shoes. I've dreaded something so much, just the hypothetical of it, what it could be. And, you know, days go by, and then I finally have no choice but to confront it. And all of a sudden it was like a splinter, you know, and not like a tree trunk in my face. You know, it was, I made it into this huge thing. But you're right. And that, you know, we talk about it next on this topic is drive versus dread that I came up with a few weeks back. And I think if we all kind of assess that dynamic of drive and dread in our life, we can eliminate a lot of that fear, because dreading
Mhm.
something is what in my opinion, is attached to our weaknesses and areas that we don't feel very comfortable. The dread stirs up our discomfort, and so we avoid it, right? The drive, if I'm going to be more driven at the things I'm good at. You agree with
Mhm.
that? Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So, but then when we stay in that comfort zone of what we're good at, we don't ever really expand our capacity for growth, because discomfort is where the growth is, man. I mean, I'll be
Mhm.
honest, physically in our bodies, like working out, man, how do you grow? Well, you got to be sore because you got to do the reps of discomfort. So, do you have does that resonate with you, the drive versus dread at all? Like, can you give us an example, like where maybe, I know you gave us a dread example from the lady you were talking about, but in your life, you know, what drives you, and then what do you find yourself dreading most often?
Oh man, like working out, like with the reps of discomfort, like you're so right. That's one of the things I had to deal with in my life because CrossFit, I was doing that for a few years because I originally was following my instructor at the time because he was a Taekwondo
Mm,
instructor who was at a martial arts school and he kept being limited there because he wanted to teach more classes because he, wanted to make more money and make a bigger impact.
yeah,
So I decided to go off and actually start his own CrossFit box and take his Taekwondo there because he also wanted to combine the facts of life where it's like you don't want to be that dad bod martial artist. You want to at least
mm,
look like you can do the part. Now, granted, they can still kick like
yeah,
your kick your booty and
sure,
everything, but still, like he just wanted to make sure that you also look the part and can also perform the part. So following that and dealing with that, like one of the biggest things I dreaded for years on end when he started those classes was the fact of doing 2-hour sessions because he would do Taekwondo class for 1 hour, then immediately do a CrossFit class afterwards. And some people be like, "Hey, Dom, you're saying?" It's like, "Nope, nope, not saying. I'm good. I've seen some of that. I'm good." And then about a good 6 to 9 months in the process, I'm like, you know what, screw it. I was going to go ahead and do it. And I did my first ever back-to-back sessions with them, and the results were amazing after a while because it was something that I dreaded at the time,
yeah,
and it eventually made me better and stronger to the fact that it helped me a lot when it came to caregiving for my dying father a few years ago.
wow,
Because like a healthy body, a strong body is which we what all leaders need. And
hmm,
if I didn't actually bite the bullet and actually start doing the CrossFit class in addition to the Taekwondo and the kickboxing that he was offering, then I probably would have never been as prepared to deal with some of those situations that
yeah,
popped up with my father a few years ago.
yeah, wow, that's good, man. Everybody, I think, can relate to dreading some sort of physical activity that stretches our capacity. What do you? I mean, you talk to a lot of. I mean, you talk to authors all the time, which I equate authors to leaders. Which I also say that everybody's a leader or has the ability to be a leader. Everybody that
Amen.
walks this earth has been wired to lead in some way. And I get a lot of pushback on that because folks are like, well, I'm not a leader. No, you really are. You just haven't tapped into that resource within yourself. So you talk to leaders all day, every day. What do you think? Maybe what's the common thread that kind of help, that prevents them in some of that dread capacity? What are you seeing a lot of from leaders nowadays?
To be honest, it's really just from a lack. People come from a place of lack, and that's another one of those easier said than done moments where it's like, yeah, come from abundance mindset. Think of
Sure,
abundance. It's
sure.
easy to say, but it's hard to do. And really just having to deal with the self-doubt is like, oh, why am I going to write a book? There's a million other books out there per year.
Hmm.
And really, like the main thing is really pushing through that and realizing that their story had to be put out and learning from other people that no matter what happens, we at the end of the day, we all want peace of mind.
Yeah,
And writing my book, telling my story is one way to have that in my life and just being okay with not being a bestseller, but just writing a good book and getting your story out there. Now, some folks, they may have turned their books into $1 million businesses. Some are just writing just as a side hobby, just for creative expression. But really, that's just the main thing, is that overcoming that self-doubt to really publish their work and get it out there. And heck, even to your point about everybody being a leader, like, it's so true, because people see and people do. And that's really what leadership is. People see, people do, people
Yeah.
hear, people do. What you
Yeah.
eventually hear is what you'll eventually become after a while. Like that, even
Yeah.
you could like, depending on who you're listening to the most is where your language is going to go. And you will tell the difference after a while when you practice self-awareness. So that's
Mhm.
really the common thread. When people see that you've written a book, they're like, oh, how'd you do that? Oh, I wish I
Mm.
could write a book. You'd be like, you could do it too. It's like, nah, I ain't got no story to tell. And
Right.
then after enough nudges, you'll eventually get that confidence. You'll be like, all right, people have been repeating this long enough. I'm going to finally do it. I'm going to finally kick myself in the butt and do this thing. And you'll feel better afterwards, because you've reached a new level of growth that would have never happened if you didn't actually put yourself to the fire and to make the magic happen. So that's really what
That's,
I've noticed over with these
yeah.
authors and these leaders.
That's awesome. And you took the words right out of my mouth whenever you talked about expectation earlier. We
Mm-hmm.
really can disqualify ourselves based on our elevated expectations and some of the hypotheticals that hinder kind of what road we go down, and I'm guilty as charged. You described my life when you talk about the voices and the conversations I had with myself, talking myself out of writing a book. Because let's be honest, I've had this thing stirring in me for years. I've been a writer my whole life. I've been decent with expression on paper. And I teach classes at church, men's ministry classes. So I have a way of articulating, but I didn't think I was, like you said, there's John Maxwell's out there. There's John Gordon's out there. There's authors that blow this thing out of the water. What do I have to say? And I think what comes to me as you were talking, for listeners that are out there that may be thinking exactly the same thing, because I know there's at least one. Everybody's got a different sphere of influence.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's got a different group of folks that they're in contact with. So my voice can impact a group that your voice doesn't, and vice
Mm-hmm.
versa. John Maxwell, one of the greatest authors of our generation, isn't going to talk to the people I talk to. They may not go buy his book. So maybe something I have to say, as small as it could be, right, could impact somebody in this pocket that I call my circle of influence. So that's my encouragement to people listening. And you would probably agree with this, that we all have a voice. We all have a story. That story matters to somebody. It could also impact somebody. So that's why when I wrote that book, I was thinking, well, if one person read that wouldn't ordinarily read another book way better than mine, and they write something down on a sticky note, like you talked about, and put it on their computer, to me, the job has been done at that point. And I feel like we're walking in obedience, right? God puts something on our heart and says, look, I equipped you for this. Nobody else. This is your job. And so I think if we take that and run with it, I think there's work to be done, and I think there's impact to be made if we can all grab onto that. You agree with that? Anything to add?
Man, I agree with you wholeheartedly, man. And heck, even speaks to the fact that we're here to do greater work. Like, Jesus
Yeah.
didn't have social media back then. We have it now. Like, it's a two-edged sword. There's some negativity there, but there's also some positivity. And we need to try to positively influence and be a progressive influence to those that God has allowed us to be, to those that are allowed to hear the message that he wants us to get the message out there. Because you're right, there's
Yeah.
pockets of people that folks can reach that we're supposed to reach. Like, we're
Yeah.
not called to be for everybody. We're not called for everybody. Like that. Like,
Yeah.
if I'm going to speak to a group of women, they'll be like, "You're the only dude in here. Get out!" Like, it's just not called to everybody. So I
Read
wholeheartedly
the
agree with you.
room. Read the room, Don. Read the
Exactly. Exactly. Just read the room. Oh, that was actually got a funny story about that one. It was actually a men's leadership conference
Yeah.
down in Arkansas, and myself and 5 of the speakers were there, and one of the other speakers, he wasn't in the conversation. I think he was in the bathroom. We were like, oh yeah, we should definitely read the room here. It's like, make sure you don't mention. We were in Arkansas, so don't mention like the football team. I think it was the Razorbacks, I believe. I
Yeah.
may have got the team.
You're right.
Yeah. And one of the speakers was from Georgia, and he was like, all right, go Bulldogs. And everybody just went silent.
Yep. Killed them. Lost the locker room at that point. Lost them.
Yeah, we all laughed about it afterwards.
Yeah. Let me guess, they didn't write much he had to say down on paper.
Yeah, but he recovered great. It was
That's
all
good.
fun and good. Everybody loved him.
Awesome. Well, hey, let's dive into the next point then. So we've talked about the A's and the B, approach. We've talked about barriers. So the C would be the clutter that's out there, because and I always use the analogy of kind of the road we're on and road construction and debris that's in the road that kind of diverts our path. So anything in your life that maybe caused you to take a detour, some of the get out of our way stuff, have you ever had a situation where you've either created this clutter yourself based on some of the lies you believed versus some of the truth you believed that are out there? Because we all have voices coming at us every day, and we have a choice, right? We have a choice what we believe. So talk about maybe some of the detours you've had to take based on some of that clutter that's out there.
Yeah, some of the detours I've taken in my life involve like getting too much into other people's content, like with finding personal development a few years ago. I was so excited. I was kind of like a human guinea pig. Each book I picked up, I tried to read it to completion. And after a while, it was like, wow, some of these books, they're starting to say the same thing. And it's like, maybe I should start actually writing my own and creating my own and actually getting more than myself. And heck, even getting back more into reading the Bible more than reading all these other books. Because I may have read parts of the Bible every day, but I should probably dedicate more time into it, because the Bible itself, it's a huge book that will take a lifetime to really learn from. And that was one of the detours. Like, heck, even my day job as a librarian, funny enough, like that, around books all day, helping folks with other things all day, and really just having to really put the books aside and get back into more silent time with myself, more time in the Word, and actually getting back into that, because sometimes we can get so distracted from so many shiny objects out there that we end up getting distracted and going on this detour where we have to get back on the main road. And the funny thing about detours is that it's always with something that looks good up front. It's like, oh, reading, that's always good. But are you reading things that'll really truly benefit you more? Like the stuff I was reading, it's all usually nonfiction stuff about business, psychology, leadership, and all that good stuff. It's beneficial stuff, but still can't neglect the major book, the book of books itself. And that's the thing. Like, sometimes that's actually one of the points that I've heard one time at a seminar, is that the good zone is something that keeps you from the greatness zone. Because sometimes that's really the enemy of greatness in our lives, is settling for something good. Like that's something that we all have to deal with, is going for greatness when the good enough may feel good enough. But after a while, you realize maybe that good enough ain't so good enough. Really, the good enough is just bad. Like, I got to go for excellence, where excellence isn't perfection. It's always seeking better than before. Like, today's excellence is not going to be tomorrow's excellence. Like, with a year from now, John, when you've probably had over 100 of these out there, you're going to be looking back and say, my goodness, man, look how much I've grown over these conversations, all this knowledge I've gained. I probably got 2 more books ready to publish after this.
Right.
That's really what I got to say about that, my man.
That's awesome. And I love that you quoted a little bit of James Collins' book, Good to Great, because, I mean, he does talk about the enemy of great is good. And I would even argue that complacency creeps in when we're satisfied with good. And there's nothing wrong, like you said, with good, but it does kind of prevent us from getting to that next step and expanding. Like I keep talking about expanding our capacity. I mean, that's what we're supposed to do, right? We're supposed to go from faith to faith and glory to glory. Like we're supposed to grow. Every leadership book, I guarantee you, talks about growth. And if it's not important, then they wouldn't. So growth is huge, right? And growth is a thing, but good prevents growth at some point if we let it. I think you hit a great perspective there. And that's why we have different people, because like no one's ever talked about that, what you just said in this particular section. And I've had 3 other people talk about clearing the debris and the clutter. That's what I love, is everybody's perspective is unique. And so the listeners out there get something different every time. And I think it's awesome, man. Kind of like a Cracker Jack box. You get a different prize every time at the bottom, right? It's the same Cracker Jacks, right? But there's something different down at the bottom. Man, I haven't had Cracker Jacks in a long time. So I think
it
it's
did
great.
taste good, though.
Yeah. I would even, you know what? As you're talking, it kind of stirred something in me to ask you, and tell me if you agree with this, and maybe you can give an example. But so some of the debris that we put out there is based on some of our past, either failures or some of the ways we've had to kind of overcome some stuff, some pain, maybe some heartache, some disappointment. We allow that to be a pothole in our future path, right? So if we hold on to something from our past, it can actually create a diversion or a barrier in front of us as we're going forward in our life. Do you have anything that you'd be comfortable talking about from maybe your past that maybe it was a really hard learning experience for you, that has that became one of those bumps in the road that you had to really address? And that's off script. I'm going to say to the listeners. So I'm taking him way off track here, and I'm catching him by surprise, but I know Dom is not fazed by it. But I mean, there may be something that you had, just a small lesson that maybe you learned that became a roadblock, but then you kind of had to address and go forward.
Hey, that's a darn good question. I'm glad you went off script, because that's usually where the best conversations happen. Heck, even sometimes when folks may be like, hey, send me 5 questions, I'll be like, I'll just put in asterisks like, hey, ask me anything. And this is a great question.
Good. Yeah.
Yep. So one thing I have to think of in past life, one thing, heck, it could be multiple things. Who knows?
Sure.
I'd like to be. Yeah. I'd have to say one thing would probably be pride would be a major thing. Because one thing about me, like I can be, when I get too comfortable in something, pride can come across that way. Sometimes it can start off as confidence, and it can get into cockiness. And then when it goes to full on pride, that's when I get knocked right back down the peg, because it was actually one time where I thought that I was going to be, it was in Taekwondo actually, when it was one of those long Sunday afternoon classes after church and everything. And we were just doing these moves and practicing these moves. And one of them was this running sidekick. You ever seen the Bruce Lee flying sidekick on like one of those, like one of the cans of teas? Like,
I did one earlier. Yeah, I did one earlier. I know exactly what you're talking about.
There you go. There you go. And I was practicing one of those moves and just really running all the way through the dojo to land that kick, and thinking that I jumped up high enough to actually get enough torque into it. I didn't. It didn't end up that way. I ended up making contact. My foot landed up at the bottom of the mat, and I landed on my right knee with all my body weight. And I was stuck limping for a good 2 months after that, because I thought I had enough actual confidence and enough height to actually land the move. But no, that wasn't the case. And not being able to walk straight for those 2 months was a very humbling experience. And it shows that we really can lose. Like we have to really be grateful for the small things. Like some folks may not have legs at all out there, and
they're
still getting that action to happen. Like that, just humbling experiences like that is like not being able to walk properly for a couple weeks. That was really a humbling experience. It just shows that you can lose it all in an instant.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing too, when you talk about that, like pride is like I talk about all the time, you could probably trace every mistake or hard lesson I've had to make, or every mistake I've made and hard lesson I've had to learn. You could trace that back probably to some level of pride in my life. And what I would say a big place for me, pride has kind of ducked in occasionally, has been trying to seek that accountability. So we try to walk this thing out alone, right? We try to walk it isolated sometimes because, right, we're self-made men. We've got this. We're problem solvers. We're fixers. So we walk this thing out and we've got it all figured out. We read enough books, right? We can handle anything. So I think accountability is a huge thing. And I think locking arms and grabbing a hold of somebody, like-minded people, faith-based people that we can go through this with and do life together. You got anybody in your life that maybe you can lean on, or and vice versa, that you've given permission to speak honestly to you, directly to you, truth and love type stuff? You got anybody like, and you don't have to name names, but do you have anybody like that? And tell me what value that's been for our listeners.
Accountability is really where true advancement in life happens, because if you don't have accountability, you're not going to grow as far as you need to go. And I have a couple of people in my life, heck, even one lady in particular, the same home organizer from earlier. She's actually one of my accountability buddies because she called me out on my BS last year when I thought I was done with something, because my second book was finally going to be published after a bunch of delays and a bunch of inner conflict I had to deal with, of basically, I guess in a way, imposter syndrome. Because I forgot, what was that term that it was the self, what was it? What was that? Not self-deletion. What was it?
Self-disqualification?
Self-disqualification. Yeah, the self-disqualification, which is a great term, by the way.
Yeah.
And just dealing with that. And I showed her this plan of how to become a best-selling author. And really, when we went down the line and nothing was really done off the list, she was like, hey, well, so do you really want this? Because you've got basically nothing done on this list. And she basically had to metaphorically smack me back into reality and help me to realize, hey, this magic is going to happen if you do the work. Like, you're a motivational speaker. You talk about doing the work. So where's your work, buddy? And just that accountability is really where the advancement happens. So I do have people in my life that I welcome them to challenge me and keep me on my toes and call me out my BS, because we all need it. Like, we're all humans. We're all going to stray. Like, we're all sheep. Like, not sheep usually turn away, so they go astray.
Sure.
So we got to get turned back and get focused. We got to stay the course here.
Yeah. I would even argue that our accountability person is somebody that we give permission to hold the mirror. So we give somebody permission to stand in front of us with that mirror and go, look, you're not seeing this part, So it's good to have another perspective. And I agree 100%. Jesus could have walked this and done all of his stuff alone. He could have performed everything he performed by himself, but he grabbed on to 12 guys and said, look, I'm going to pour into you so you can pour into others and keep this thing alive. And I think that's another thing too. Accountability gives us that person to keep us honest, but it also gives us someone to kind of pour into, reciprocate some of that two-way encouragement, if you will, because that person is going to have an impact somewhere else. So I think it helps us pour into somebody else as well as look in the mirror. Man, that's awesome perspective. Thank you for being able to kind of stick and move on that off script, last minute catch you off guard moment. I appreciate that because, it just kind of, sometimes when we go into this, the Spirit kind of leads in a direction and I want to just go where it goes because he knows more than I do. So that's why that just kind of hit me out of the blue. But no, I think we do, we learn hard lessons, kind of going back to clearing the debris and the clutter. We learn hard lessons in our past and we can't let that define the journey that we're on and create a roadblock for us because we still have that road we're on. Let's not hold on to that. Let's address it, of course. Let's talk to somebody about it, but then let's deflect it. Let's cut it away and move forward. So Dom, I really appreciate, talk to the people because I'm going to look at your notes again. And so the Going North podcast is on the Apple Podcast app, right?
Oh yeah, wherever you listen to podcasts, you can find it.
Absolutely. Okay. What else? Talk about your other books as well. Tell me, just kind of give me some titles. Give us an idea of where else we can find you.
Sure thing, folks. So head over to dombrightman.com, dombrightman.com. That's where you find all the information about yours truly, the wonderful books that are out there with my name attached to them, and the Going North podcast itself. And there's also a free gift for those who've made it to the end called the 21 Lessons Learned from 2+ Years of Podcasting. If you're looking to start a podcast of your own or even grow it, like pick up that ebook. It'll be great for you to grow your influence as a podcast, like even some life influence too, because some of the stuff in there can be applicable to life as well. You can find all that on dombrightman.com.
Man, I appreciate it. It's been a slice of heaven having you on. It's been a slice of heaven. I've enjoyed it, man. I've loved your perspective. It's been unique and it's been powerful. Listeners, I hope you got one thing out of this conversation. Um, Look at your approach, make some self-correction, look at the barriers within yourself and get rid of some of that stuff, the pride, the insecurity, the fear, and clear some of the debris out of the way, because we're all on this path together. Like, we all are leaders. We all have a purpose and a destiny, and don't let some of that past stuff, the lessons you've had to learn, don't let that continue to be a hindrance. And you know what? I think you'll be excited to see what God's going to do. Just kind of release yourself from some of that. But again, Dom, it's been great. Thank you so much. Listeners, thank you for tuning in. I'm glad that I'm going to assume you got something good from it and that you're going to be able to walk this out. So until next time, be blessed.